Hello, Bentley Compost Guy, Christy here again. Right off the bat, I'm going to warn you, this is a very impromptu, kind of spur of the moment video. It is December 6th, 2019, and I wanted to do a sort of live action reveal, I guess, of this bucket system. This is a bucket system that I set up around the middle of October, my very first breathable bucket system. And I kind of want to do an in-depth look at what's going on inside. I've done a little bit of looking around here and there, but overall, I'm not 100% sure what's happening deep down in this system. In terms of feeding, I started with some comfrey, and then around the end of October, sort of maybe 2 weeks in or so, I did another feeding of comfrey, but I actually haven't done any more than that. I haven't added any food waste. I'd sort of planned to turn it into a pretty typical system, adding kitchen scraps and whatnot, but I haven't done a whole lot of that. What you see over here is another idea that I had for a breathable bucket. Someone mentioned, why don't, instead of these vents, these cool vents that you're putting in, why not just kind of put some window screen or something like that over holes on the bin? And I thought, it's not a bad idea as a way to kind of simplify the process. If you don't want to do the caps, I really like the cap approach. But so anyway, I just drilled these bigger holes. You can probably see the light coming through down there. Pretty big holes, couple rows of them. And in this case, I didn't happen to have any window screen, so I had this old bed sheet that I basically kind of taped over top. And I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't really set up that system, but I just wanted to touch on that because there are different ways to set up these breathable buckets, and I do hope to test that one out as well. So, back to this one. As I think I touched on, I've kind of checked on it briefly here and there, but I haven't really done all that much with it. One of the things right off the bat that I kind of noticed, well, there's a couple things. There's a kind of a negative thing and then some interesting things. I guess let's start with the negative thing. It does appear as though I have ended up with some scuttle flies. Scuttle flies, see these guys? Scuttle flies are like big fruit flies, essentially. And the way you can tell the difference is that a scuttle fly is going to literally scuttle, just as the name implies, along a surface. Fruit flies kind of hover around really slowly. They're pretty small. They're really annoying. They're kind of in clouds. But a scuttle fly is like this big fruit fly, essentially. It's what it looks like. And they run. You see, they're also called coffin flies. And they're really, really annoying. They're in some ways kind of easier in that they're running around a lot. Kind of squish them and everything else, but they can be a real pain in the butt. And I knew I had them in the house. And yeah, it's hard to say how they got in. But so that's one thing right off the bat. This isn't potentially as sealed off as I had hoped. But yeah, moving on. Everything looks pretty good in there. It smells very good. Again, this is the very top of the system. Now that's interesting. I guess I must have added, I thought I had only added comfrey, but I must have done one deposit of kitchen scraps because I'm seeing some avocado. But anyway, it smells fantastic. This upper zone is moist, but it's not overly dry. My initial impression, there's some dry areas. The impression that I had was that it had dried out a fair bit, but this isn't too bad. There's a worm right there. I'm just going to kind of dig down fairly quickly. Little worm. Yeah, this is definitely a good sign so far, other than those scuttle flies. And the one thing that right off the bat, when I set up this system, that breathable fabric lid with the loose elastic to tighten it down, I was certainly not all that confident that it was going to be all that great at keeping out pests. So I suspect that's what's happened. I have added some material from outside, but I don't really think that's where the scuttle flies came from. You can see a little mite running around there. When they run around that fast, I tend to think those are the predatory mites. I mean, those are the little guys running around munching, hopefully on scuttlefly larvae. And to be honest, I mean, this thing is certainly not overrun with scuttleflies. I've had some very bad infestations of those guys, and this isn't. Oh, look at that! See, now that's a good sign too. When you see isopods in a system, in a worm bin, it means that your moisture levels are moist, but they're not excessively moist. It means that there's good aeration, so that can be a good sign. If you see a ton of them, then oftentimes you're getting on the dry side. But you know, typically when I have an enclosed plastic worm bin, those isopods are disappearing eventually. So I kind of think that's a good sign in this case. So all in all, you know, it doesn't look like a whole lot's really happening here, but based on the smell of everything, I'm seeing a lot of worms, but a lot of very small worms. Just kind of getting down now into what was the original material that was added from the comfrey worm bin. You can see that's very rich material. It was already pretty dark and processed by the time I added it. What I'm curious about now is that's a little tiny worms. I'm curious about the false bottom, because that was sort of the safety zone down on the very, very bottom, where the airflow would be coming through. The vents were sort of lined up with that false bottom. I'm seeing lots, see that little cocoon there? Lots of really, really small worms. Just quite interesting. Now, part of it is that I really, really, like I said, haven't done a whole lot in terms of feeding. 2 or 3 feedings maybe. But it's not an active, typical kind of home worm bin where you're adding food scraps all the time, anything like that. I really do want to get to that point, but so far it's been the set it and forget it for the most part. I'm amazed here. Like, this is what on earth happened to my false bottom. I thought for sure that was going to last for quite a while. So that's really interesting. And just so many little teeny tiny worms all down. They love that wet cardboard and paper. And this is really interesting because this was well, there you go. Like, it's the cardboard is there for the most part. They absolutely love this cardboard stuff. When it gets wet, they love just hanging out down there. Oh my goodness, just tons and tons of worms down there. But it's really compressed. But the great sign is that it's earthy. It's not like this swamp. Like, if you did a regular bucket system, it would be just an absolute swamp down on the bottom of it.
just because there's not enough surface area and airflow to allow for oxygenation of these lower zones. So I'm happy about that. I am a little surprised that it has, these worms are all over the place, has compacted as much as it has. Now I think the real thing to test moving forward is, I can't get over all these little tiny worms everywhere. Stuff like this, I love seeing that. Like, I don't really care too much how big a worm is, but when you see so many of these little worms, if you took some of this material, part of this bin, and just started up a new system, it would be crazy just how fast that population would grow. And it's far more worms than you would realize in this material. But anyway, yeah, so far so good. There's no pooling, absolutely no pooling in the bottom. Smells awesome, smells like a really nice, rich worm bin. And the upper zones, especially, are really, really in good shape. So it's safe to say that this is easily the equivalent of a well-aerated typical home plastic worm bin with a lid on it, and I'm starting to think that it's kind of superior, because all the way down, typically what you're going to end up with in a Rubbermaid, something like that, you're going to end up with this swampy, smelly zone down on the bottom, and I'm not seeing any of that right now. So these vents are great. I'm really curious. Like, there's only four, or no, I think it was only three. There's only three in this first bin. I'm really curious to know. I'm almost a little bit leery. I'm thinking that maybe I've gone overboard with this one. You can see that, like I said, there's a couple rows, all these holes around there. It might be a bit too much. Like, I love set it and forget it type of systems, and I don't want to be having to water it and constantly add food and things like that. So, you know, it depends on what you're into. That one may be good for a more active system, and maybe that's what we'll do. We'll add some water, we'll add some food on a more regular basis, and we'll see what happens with that. But all in all, very happy with these bucket systems. I highly recommend them. Very small footprint on the ground. You can get a bunch of them in a smaller area than you would with a Rubbermaid tub or something like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for now, and I'll certainly aim to provide you with another update, I don't know, maybe in another month or two. All right, once again, this is Bentley Compost Guy Christie. Thanks for tuning in.